All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Torah Studies. This is our weekly look at the Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is Beha'alotecha, and tonight's topic is about Passover. And you might be thinking, Passover? It's almost like that commercial, playoffs. Passover was like 2 months ago. What's going on? Okay, so here's the deal. Passover comes up because in this week's Torah portion, we have a discussion about Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, Passover 2.0. We're going to talk about the origins of that. We'll explore a confusing verse and an eye-opening Rashi as we roll out tonight's conversation. So the first thing we're going to do is I'll share with you just a little bit of an overview of the opening of the Torah portion. The Torah portion, Beha'alotecha, opens with a discussion about the lighting of the menorah. Now, who was it that lit the menorah in the Mishkan or in the Beit HaMikdash? Which type of person had to light the menorah? It was only able to be lit by a Kohen. Well, the Kohen lit it, although theoretically it could be lit by anyone. It had to be lit inside the Kodesh, which means not the Kodesh, not the Holy of Holies, but in the space called the Holies. That would be, let's say, when there was the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, it was like the building, the inner building, not the innermost building, but the inner building that housed three items. There was an incense altar, a showbread table, and the menorah. So the only person that could go into that space was a Kohen, and thus the Kohen would light it. The opening of the Torah portion tells us that God tells Moses to tell Aaron about lighting the menorah. When he lights the menorah, all the 7 branches, and the temple menorah wasn't a 9-brancher like we have, branch menorah. It was a 7-brancher. It had a center stem, 3 on each side, all the same height, because it wasn't like the middle was a shamish and it's really 8. All 7 were equally part of the mitzvah. And the Torah tells us that the other 6, and there was a 3 on each side, the wicks and the flames were meant to kind of face the middle. They were kind of turned toward the middle to shine toward the center lamp. That's the opening, center stem. That's the opening of the Torah portion. And then the Torah portion gets into the roles of the Levites, or the inauguration, or the roles of the Levites serving in the Mishkan. And then we have a conversation about the very first anniversary of Passover, of the Exodus, the first celebrated Passover. Now, we all know that of the Jewish holidays, Pesach is number 1. When I say number 1, what I mean is it's the most observed Jewish holiday. I mean, as much as people show up in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, more people go to more Seders. Sounds like a commercial. More people go to more Seders than really any other Jewish observance. Seder is the most observed Jewish ritual experience, holiday-related experience. So, when was the first Seder? Well, I mean, the simple answer is the first Seder was, I guess you could say, the night of the Exodus, where they had a Paschal lamb and they had matzah, they had mar. It was the last meal they ate before the Exodus. But I guess, did they know that, the significance of it? I don't know. The first time they celebrated what had happened, because the first time it happened, but the first time they had celebrated, the first time they celebrated what had happened was obviously the year later. And indeed, this week's Torah portion tells us what happens 1 year later. Well, it's a year minus 2 weeks. So it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan in the year 2449. So this is, again, 352 days, days after, the solar lunar calendars. It's a year minus 2 months after the Exodus, and God tells Moses, we're going to do it again. We're going to do it again. Just so you know, it's very important to know this. When the mitzvah was originally given for the Paschal lamb and the whole Passover experience, so God tells Moses to tell the people to do it in Egypt, and then says, it's going to be a statute for all generations. When you come into your land, this is the mitzvah that you're going to do. They were not at that point, year 2, and it was 1 year later, they were not yet in the land of Israel. They were still in the wilderness. They were still in the desert. And they get the call from above. They get the command from God to observe Passover, to observe the anniversary. How should they observe it? Let's read this inside. So, David, I'll ask you to read in a moment. We're going to jump right into the text. Give me one moment. Let me pull up, actually close some unnecessary files here. Let me open up the correct text. We're going to start with text 2a, actually. Okay, we're going to go back to text 1. Don't worry, we're going to go back to it in a moment. But we're going to start with, hey, Susan, welcome. We're going to start with text 2a. This is chapter 9 of the book of Numbers, the first 5 verses.
God spoke to Moses in the Sinai desert in the 2nd year of their exodus from the land of Egypt, in the 1st month, saying, "The children of Israel should make the Paschal lamb at its appointed time. On the afternoon of the 14th of this month, you should make it at its appointed time and in accordance with all its statutes and ordinances." Moses spoke to the children of Israel, instructing them to make the Paschal lamb. So on the 1st month, in the afternoon of the 14th day of the month, they made the Paschal lamb in the Sinai desert, according to all that God had commanded Moses. So did the children of Israel do.
Okay, so here we have the commandment. Sandrine, you okay? Getting there. Hi. So here we have the commandment to observe the first anniversary of the Exodus. And this is 2 weeks before, so they're getting a 2-week notice, right? God tells Moses to tell the people on the 14th of the month, meaning 14 days from now, they should make the Paschal lamb at the appointed time. It's in the afternoon of the 14th, and do it as with all the details. And Moses tells the people, and indeed, that is what they did. Verse 5 says, "So as God had commanded Moses, so did the children of Israel do." All goes off without a hitch. Now, one second, before we go any further, we're not going to look at text 2b yet, because I have to introduce something else. I'm going to introduce now text 1. Now, text 1 is found in the Torah 4 chapters prior to what we just read. So it's from last week's Torah portion. It's 4 chapters prior. God gave Moses another set of commands. So here's how it worked. On Rosh Chodesh Nisan, God gave a number of commandments. God gave a number of commandments to Moses to tell the people. One of them was about the Paschal lamb. Another was about forms of ritual impurity and the laws governing them. And you'll see in a moment what I mean by that. Let's take a read of text 1. Scott, please read text number 1 from Numbers 5, verse 2. Going back, yeah.
God spoke to Moses.
No, text 1.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Command the children of Israel to banish from the camp all those afflicted with sarat, or with a male discharge, and all those who are ritually unclean through contact with the dead.
Okay, so this is one of the commandments that God transmitted to Moses to tell the people on the very same day as the Paschal lamb details. Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month of Nisan, the year 2449, God also gives the command with regards to, I guess we would call this where you can be laws. That's a very elaborate form, but kind of like where you can be and where you cannot be relative to the camp. Now, I need to share the following with you. Can I borrow that pen? Thank you very much. Does anybody have a blank sheet of paper?
No.
Okay. You do have? Okay, great. We're going to see my drawing skills in a moment. Because what I want to share with you is that there are 3 individuals that are mentioned in text 1. There is the one that has sarat, that is the biblical form of leprosy. There's one that has, thank you very much, a male discharge. This refers to an unhealthy, I think the word is venereal discharge. I think that might be the word. And then the third category, those who have come in contact with the dead. So in Hebrew, you have sarat, you have the zav, that's the guy with the male discharge. It's the unhealthy, it's a specific form of male discharge that is unhealthy. And then you have the one who came in contact with the dead. And these 3 individuals have 3 different laws associated with them. And I'm going to draw, give me a second, I'm going to draw something. So the way the encampment worked is that you had the Mishkan in the middle, okay? Mishkan. And then outside of it, I don't know if you know what this is. All right, we're just going to draw it in. My dash lines are not a little overrated. So Mishkan, then we had Leviim and Yisroelim. Okay, here we go. You guys see this? Why did I draw it so small? Okay, so this was the encampment. When the Jewish people were encamped, thank you very much. When the Jewish people were encamped in the wilderness. You guys see this also? Right? So the way it worked is they pitched their tents, their camp, whatever it's called, in a very specific configuration. In the middle of the camp was the Mishkan, was the tabernacle. So the tabernacle was in the middle, the dead center of the camp. Immediately around it, surrounding it on all four sides, were the Levites. Well, it was really the Kohanim and the Leviim. The priests and the Levites were surrounding it. Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi, they surrounded the Mishkan. And then surrounding them were the 12 tribes. 3 tribes in the north, 3 in the east, 3 in the south, 3 in the west. 3, 3, 3, 3, 12 tribes. They were the outer ring. The ring inside of that were the Levites, and the center was the Mishkan. Yes? Yes, 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 yes. You guys see this as well? All right. Now, here's how it works. The fellow afflicted with Sarat was banished outside all 3 camps. For the duration, excuse me, of the Sarat affliction, the Mitzorah, the one with Sarat, had to be totally outside. On your own, right? Go travel to the nearest cactus and call it a day. So they were outside all 3 camps. The Zav was allowed to be in Machane Yisrael, in the Israelite camp. So they could be in this outermost camp, but they could not be in the Levite camp or in the tabernacle grounds. Yep, with me? And what about the one who came in contact with death? In other words, with a dead body. So they could be in the Israelite camp. In the Levite camp, they were only prohibited from being inside the Mishkan itself, in the tabernacle, in the 4 walls, as it were, the courtyard, the area of the tabernacle itself in the middle. Okay, so 3 levels of impurity, 3 levels of, I don't know, location where they could be. The Mitzorah outside of all 3 camps, the Zav, the male with the unhealthy discharge, had to be outside the 2 camps, the 2 innermost camps, and the one who came in contact with death had to be only outside the innermost camp, i.e. the space of the Mishkan itself. Okay? Good. Now, this leads to text 2b. Text 2b is where things get very interesting. Now, why do I say they get interesting? They get interesting because at this point, when Moses delivers the message to the people that now that we're approaching the first anniversary of the Exodus, it's time to reenact and to once again offer the Paschal lamb, etc. Once Moses makes the call for this, a group of people, seems like they were a small group, but a group of people show up, and now they lodge a complaint. Or, yeah, I guess you could say they lodge a complaint. Can you imagine Jews kvetching? It happens. Text 2b, Dasi, please read.
Okay. Some men were ritually unclean because of contact with a dead person and could not make the Paschal lamb on that day. So they approached Moses and Aaron on that day. Those men said to him, "We are ritually unclean because of contact with a dead person, but why should we be excluded so as to not offer a sacrifice to God in its appointed time with all the children of Israel?"
Okay, so these people come to Moses and Aaron, and they say, we've got a problem, right? We've got a problem. We are ritually unclean. We've come in contact with a dead person. Anachnu temeim lenefesh adam. We are impure, and the level of impurity is that we came in contact with death. Right? So why should we be excluded so as not to offer the sacrifice amongst the rest of the people? Essentially, they were arguing that there should be an exception made for them, or something should be made for them, that they should be able to offer this Paschal lamb. Sorry?
This is a good argument.
It's a good argument. Now, let's break this down for a second. So first of all, who are these people? The Torah doesn't specify. The commentaries have a number of suggestions. My favorite one, why is it my favorite? I don't know. Just the one that comes to mind is the one that says that these were the people that were carrying the remains of Joseph toward his final resting place. As if you recall, when Joseph the righteous, when he passed away in Egypt, centuries prior, he told his family, he told his kids, he told the mishpacha, you can inter me, you can bury me or lay me to rest in Egypt, but when you leave, take me with you. It was the night of the Exodus, and Moses was looking for the remains of Joseph. He went to the Nile River because that's where Pharaoh had ordered that Joseph be buried in the Nile River, because that would be a source of blessing for the Nile. This was well before they knew about diseases and whatnot. So a burial inside a river that you're drinking from made a lot of sense back then to them. So they somehow laid Joseph to rest there, maybe in the river, whatever it was. Moses was looking. He didn't know where it was. He writes, he heard Sarah bas Asher, Sarah, the daughter of Asher, who was the one that told Jacob that Joseph was still alive. So Jacob had blessed her with long life. She was still living. She said, Joseph is in the Nile. She was the only one still. She had lived for a very, very long time. So she told Moses that he was by the Nile, but they didn't know exactly where. And so he wrote on a piece of, parchment paper or something. He wrote the words, Ale Shar, rise ox. Joseph is likened to the ox. He wrote it on on some sort of piece of paper, dropped it on the Nile River, and the coffin rose. Subsequently, someone snatched the paper, and later when they threw the gold into the fire, right? When they were looking for a new god, as it were, right? After Moses didn't come down after 40 days, the person threw that paper into the fire, and out came a golden calf, Ale Shar, rise ox. Not only did it work for Joseph's remains, it worked to create a golden calf out of the molten gold that they had thrown into the fire. That's a little bit of the midrashic text in the background. But be that as it may, yes.
If the word was ox, why did a calf come out? Would it not have been an adult?
It's I don't know. I guess it was, I don't know. Why a baby and not a full ox? Not sure. But so it was. This is according to either the Talmud or the Medrash. This is a famous backstory that connects a few pieces together. So it turns out
Did people die of
die
of natural cause at that time?
Yes.
Okay. So somebody could have had a dead family member.
Yeah. So some say that Some say that it was the people that were carrying Joseph's remains. They were the ones that came to Moses and Aaron and said, now we're being punished. We're doing this mitzvah, but we're ritually impure because we're in contact with a dead body. So now you're punishing us by not allowing us to bring this Paschal lamb. It's not fair. It's not fair, they say. Now, halavai, all complaints should be like this, wanting to do a mitzvah. This is actually, given the things that the Jewish people complained about, like, there's no meat. What do we expect us to eat? Meanwhile, they had all the cattle, right, that they took out of Egypt. There's no meat. God, all you're giving us is manna. We need more. It's like, okay. I have all the things that people complain of. The manna, it's so boring. It's the same thing every single day. Oh, my gosh, right? It's like, of all the things that they could complain about, here it actually is, right, Ramon, as you said, actually is it's a good argument. They want to do the mitzvah. They feel left out. They feel excluded. It's not fair. Good. Now, the question is, though, what was her question? The question is, what was her question? they're saying that they should bring the offering. Well, hold on. That very same day, they received the mitzvah or the prohibition that we read in text 1. Do you remember what the prohibition is? If you're come in contact with a dead body, where can you not be? You cannot be in the Mishkan. What were they saying? They're saying, well, we want to bring the Paschal lamb. What's the answer? Y'all can't bring the Paschal lamb because you're impure, and someone who's impure by contact with death, human death, cannot enter the Mishkan. So then what were they thinking? I mean, they just heard, that day they heard 2 laws. Number 1, you can't go into the Mishkan if you're impure, by a dead body. Number 2, the Paschal lamb. And so, yes, they put 1 and 2 together and they said it's not fair. But what's their complaint? It's the law is the law. Let's take a look at how this question is articulated by the Mizrahi, one of the commentaries. This is going to be text number 3. Rabbi Elo Mizrahi says the following. I'm going to check. For some reason, it seems like the air went off. Ramon, please read text 3 while I adjust the temperature. Take it away.
How could they ask this question? Had they not yet heard the instructions about banning the ritually impure from the camp? Of course they did. After all, 8 sets of instructions were given to Moses that day, one of which was about the banishment of the impure.
All right, so the Mizrahi asks, what kind of question is it? They had already heard that day, or they had just heard that day, the prohibition about someone who's in that state of ritual impurity being inside the Mishkan, being inside the vicinity of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. And so obviously they can't bring the sacrifice because they're impure. So then what's the question? They might not feel good about it, but that's an emotional situation. It's not an intellectual question. What are they saying to Moses? Why are we being left out? Why are we being excluded? I got the answer. You know the answer. We all know the answer because you're impure. So what's the complaint?
If anyone knows, Moses would know that it's not like not allowed to argue, your case against God, against the law.
Okay, so Ramon, you're saying that they knew the law, they were still arguing. Why? Because they're pushing the envelope. Right. They're basically saying, can we petition for an amendment here?
Right.
Can we have it? Should we have a change? Moses did it, right? He got the forgiveness for the aforementioned sin of the golden calf. Good. It's a good argument. Take a look at Rashi, because Rashi addresses this. It's an obvious question that comes up, like what was their claim? Was it simply, in other words, on a very simple level, we could say that maybe their claim was, we don't like the law, or the law feels unfair. We feel targeted. We feel excluded. We want it to change. That's on a basic level. You could say that. Rashi gives us a little bit more of an interesting dialogue between these people and Moses on that day. So now let's take a look at what Rashi says. And this is going to be the key piece that we're going to analyze today. This is going to be text number 4. Centrine, please take it away, text 4.
What should we do thou? Moses told them, sacrifices can't be offered in a state of impurity. They said to Moses, let ritually clean priests sprinkle the blood for us, and we will eat the meat in a state of ritual impurity.
All right, let's focus here on this Rashi for a second. Thank you for reading that. Let's focus on the Rashi. Now, it's very important to know that Rashi, as we know, always begins his commentary by quoting a few words from the verse itself. The words that he quotes in text 4, the words that he quotes in this Rashi, are the words lama nigara, which literally means why should we lose out? So why should we lose out is the quote from the verse. Now, that's not Rashi. Rashi begins with the word Moses, and Rashi gives us the dialogue. It's almost like a play with lines. Moses said, the people said, right? So the people say to Moses, why should we lose out? Moses told them, right? Sacrifices can't be offered in a state of impurity. So their question is, why are we excluded? And Moses says, what do you mean why are you excluded? Because it can't be offered in a state of impurity. So what do they reply? Look at what they reply. They said to Moses, again, I'm just rereading text 4 because it's very important to get the words. They said to Moses, let ritually clean priests, Kohanim, sprinkle the blood for us, and we'll eat the meat in a state of ritual impurity. What were they saying essentially? What should happen?
We'll stay out of the Mishkan, but give us the meat.
Done. Beautiful. You're saying that we can't do what? We can't go into the Mishkan, to the tabernacle. Great, no problem. We're gonna go. We're gonna make the priests our shliach or shluchim, our emissaries. They'll be our agents. They're gonna do it. They're gonna sprinkle the blood. They're gonna do all the stuff that needs to be done. And then when it comes out with the meat, we'll eat it. When are they gonna eat it? By the way, when are they gonna eat it?
While they're still
That night.
impure.
While they're still impure, that night at their Seder, first anniversary Passover Seder, right? Recalling what happened exactly 1 year prior at the Exodus. So it was the 14th day, because you bring the Paschal lamb, you do the Paschal lamb in the afternoon, but then you only eat it after nightfall, which is, when we have our Seders, the night of the 15th, right after nightfall. And that's exactly what they were saying. They're saying, look, let it be brought by the Kohanim today. Let them do it, sprinkle the blood, whatever has to be done on our behalf. And then tonight we'll eat it in a state of virtual impurity. Yeah.
If they're impure, when they bring the animal, would the animal not become impure?
No, not necessarily. Would it transfer to the animal? And even if it would, conceptually, they could send it with someone else. Even they can make someone an agent to schlep it. I don't believe that. It's a good question. I don't believe that it would invalidate the animal for being brought just by like touch or leading it. But even if for some reason that was also a sticking point, they could always send it with someone else. By the way, they had like an Instacarbon. You just fire it up. That's a joke, but like, okay,
Instacount.
Exactly.
Do you think they felt they did a mitzvah by burying the dead?
Say it again.
Huh? Do you think they felt they did a mitzvah because they must have been the ones that buried whoever was dead, and that's a mitzvah?
For sure, they felt that they had done a mitzvah. They shouldn't be left out. 100%.
So they should be cut some slack.
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, that you could say that that's the. But so Moses tells them. So they say, cut us some slack. So Moses says, you can't do it. They say, well, how about a compromise? What if, the priests sprinkle the blood, we're not going to go in, and then, okay. Now, the problem with this is multiple fold, which is not a word, is there's a manifold, and many problems with this Rashi, with this dialogue, the whole thing. First of all, who says there was a dialogue? A back and forth. Rashi's inventing this whole script. They said, why are we left out? Moses says, because you're impure. They said, well, what if the priests sprinkle the blood and because they're pure, and then we'll eat it, and we're even in a state of impurity. By the way, ultimately what happened, I don't think I finished the actual story. Ultimately, Moses says, wait here. Good question. I'm going to consult with the Lord, and comes back and he says basically, all right, it's not going to work for this time, but a month later, y'all have a second chance to get pure and to do it. We call this Pesach Sheni. 1 month later, in the 14th of the month of Iyar, you have a chance to do it. And to this day, we observe Pesach Sheni. We eat a little bit of matzah. We don't do the Paschal lamb because we don't do the Paschal lamb, even the first Pesach. But a little matzah we eat in commemoration of that. But that was the answer that they got. But again, Rashi gives us this whole play, like everyone's got a script. Why are we left out? Because you're impure. But why can't the Kohanim bring it, and then we'll eat it? Let me ask God. Okay, so where did Rashi get this from? What's going on here? That's question number one. Second question is, the fact that they said to Moses, why are we being left out? And then Moses says, because you're impure. That seems like obvious, like they would have known that already, because again, they had been given that commandment on that day, that prohibition from being inside the area of the Mishkan. And I mean, you could also say, and maybe extrapolate, that if they weren't allowed to be physically in the area of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, well, then maybe they certainly wouldn't be able to eat of the sacrificial meat. Like, why did they think that was okay? In their ultimate ask, which they said, like, how about the priests offer on our behalf, and then we'll eat it? Well, why did they think that was okay? Why is eating it okay in a state of impurity? If you can't step into the temple without doing it, then why is the sacrificial meat that comes out, why is that any less prohibited to be eaten by someone who's in a state of impurity? We know actually the law is that it cannot be eaten by someone in a state of impurity. And so the question is, what were they thinking? And so Rashi leaves with a bunch of questions. Again, who says there was a dialogue, a back and forth? The Torah doesn't say that. Rashi seems to invent this, number one. Number two, their question in the beginning, the way Rashi frames it, their initial question is, why are we being left out? And Moses says, because you're impure. They should have known that. That piece of dialogue should be out. They should have just started by saying, what if the priests bring it and then we eat it? That should be the opening of this conversation. And then the third question is, why did they think they could eat it in a state of impurity? That's actually prohibited as well. If you can't be there, you also can't eat sacrificial meat. And so the answer to all these questions, about to like blow our collective mind here. Oh, David, jump in. Somebody has a question. Dave, yeah.
Well, hold on to my question. I don't want to interrupt your
Okay.
mind-blowing answers.
The mind-blowing. So it all comes back. It's actually unbelievable. This is the Rebbe's insight into Rashi. It's actually stunning and just like astounding when you realize the following point. You know what? Let's do this together. Let's see if we can figure this out together. I want to draw your attention. Let me pull this up here. I want to draw your attention to text. I'm going to find this in a second. 2a. And I want you to pay attention to how the Paschal Lamb is referred to in the beginning of the text and at the end of the text. Okay, this is text 2a. It's on page 137. All right, take a look at this. How is the Paschal Lamb referred to in verse number 2? What's the verb? Make the Paschal Lamb. Does anybody find that weird? By the way, in Hebrew, vayasu. They shall make the Paschal Lamb, the inventing lambs. Abracadabra, made a lamb. Made a lamb, okay, weird. Verse 3. What's the third verse? What does it say? What's the verb used? Make. And again in the Hebrew, tasu. Again, same word asa. The same shoresh, right? Asa, vayasu, tasu. They shall make, or you shall make. Verse 4. What's the verb?
Make.
Yeah, pretty consistent. Lasot, hapasach. I mean, 3 different versions, but all the same verb, make. And verse 5? Made. Good. They did it. I was wrong, by the way. I said beginning and end of I meant 2a and 2b. So in text 2a, what's clear is every time the Paschal Lamb situation is discussed and described, it's about making it, making the Paschal Lamb. Great. Let's look at text 2b.
Is text 2a not just very repetitive?
Yeah, it's a little bit. The first half of text 2a is God telling Moses what to do. And then 4 and 5 is Moses relaying that information to the Jewish people. And so that's why it's definitely repetitive on that level. But even within it, it might be a little bit repetitive. But
if the Torah is not supposed to be...
But there's definitely things that are learned out, certainly from the repetition. But it's gone to Moses to the people about making the Paschal Lamb. Now let's take a look at text 2b. What's the verb in verse 6 about the Paschal Lamb? What's the verb? Make. Good. Consistent. There were people that were unable to make it. They could not make it. Make it. Okay. Great. Verse 7.
Sacrifice.
Oh, offer a sacrifice. Suddenly it becomes a sacrifice that's being offered and not made. Aha. Why the change? What's happening here? Up until now, every single time we encounter the Pesach, right, the Paschal Lamb, it says, make it, you shall make it, they shall make it, they made it, they couldn't make it. It's all about making it. Suddenly in verse 7, when the people come to Moses and they lodge their complaint, the impure people come to Moses, and they say, Anachnu tameim lenefesh adam, we are impure. Lama nigara, why are we being excluded? Why should we be excluded? Levilti hakriv es karban Hashem, to not be permitted to offer a sacrifice to God. Suddenly it becomes a sacrifice that's being offered. You should know that 1 year prior, in Egypt, the very first time they did the Paschal lamb, guess what? It's not called there either. It's not called a sacrifice. And it's not called that they offered a sacrifice either. We're about to open up our minds to this incredible idea that is so simple and almost so obvious, it defies, like it's mind-blowing how simple and intuitive this idea is. You ready? What was the Paschal lamb? Now, you might say, well, it was an offering, it was a sacrifice. 1 second. What was the Paschal lamb year one? What was it? Where did they offer it?
It was a sign.
Good. Where did they bring it? Where did they slaughter the Paschal lamb in Egypt? Where? In the Mishkan? In the Mishkan?
At their house.
In their homes. What they do with the blood? Why'd they put it on the
Put it on the
doorpost?
doorpost.
Good. Why'd they put it on the doorpost?
Because that's what they were told to do.
Good. But and as a sign for
The
the angel of death.
to pass over.
To literally pass over Pesach. That's the whole name, comes from
So
that.
the first one was supper.
Right. Right. So they didn't offer it as a sacrifice. They slaughtered it. They took the blood as a sign on the doorpost, and the meat they ate. Comes along 1 year later, Moses says to them, same words, make a Paschal lamb. What are they thinking? It's an offering or not an offering? What are they thinking up at that point? They're thinking it's probably
Dinner.
dinner. In other words, just like you're supposed to eat matzah, just like you're supposed to eat marar, you're also supposed to eat meat. How do you get meat? You got to slaughter it. Okay, well, maybe you're going to sprinkle some blood, whatever, but it's not a sacrifice. It's dinner, right? It's what's for dinner. It's making dinner. That's what it is. You're making the Paschal lamb. You're making dinner on Passover night. That's what you're doing. So these guys come along. They're getting the sense. This is the part that I'm not exactly sure, but somehow they felt like they were being excluded. So they come to Moses and they say to Moses, Lama nigara? Why are we being excluded? In other words, they knew they were impure. Just because we're impure, who cares? It's not a sacrifice. Since when has this been called a sacrifice? Not once. This is the incredible thing. Obviously, we don't have the ability or the time. I guess we have the ability, but not the time necessarily, to go through all of the pages from I guess the book of Exodus until the book of Numbers. Not one time is it referred to as a sacrifice. It's not a carbon. It doesn't say that. Doesn't use the terminology. Making it, preparing it, zevach. He used the word zevach in Egypt. Zevach means a slaughtering, an act of slaughtering. Well, zevach could also be for personal use. So in their heads, these people in their heads, this was not a sacrifice, that therefore the laws of ritual purity would be a problem about. They're like, okay, so can we be part of this? Yeah. So 1 second. So Moses says to them, Moses is the first one that now, and this is why Rashi fills in the dialogue. So they come to Moses and say, so this is fine, right? We're not going to be left out of this one because it's not a sacrifice. Moses says, no. It is a sacrifice. Even though we haven't said it clearly, even though the Torah, God himself has used the word lasot or yasu or ta'asu. They shall make the Paschal lamb, ta'asu as a Pesach, even though the verb that was used is make and not offer. But this is an offering. This is a sacrifice. Now, let's pause here for a moment. We're right in the middle of the dialogue. I know, but let's read this inside. Let's take a look. Let's take a look-see. I think maybe we're up to you. Please read text number 5.
If you follow the Torah's literal meaning, the Paschal lamb they brought the previous year in Egypt did not have the status of an offering. The Paschal lamb that the Jews were instructed to bring in Egypt was a unique mitzvah. They were to slaughter a lamb, roast it, and eat it on the night of Passover together with matzah and maror. That was the extent of the mitzvah. They were not instructed to bring a traditional sacrifice to God.
Let me pause for a moment. There wouldn't even be the context to bring a traditional sacrifice to God in Egypt. They didn't have a temple. They didn't have an altar. They didn't have any of the traditional spaces, items, etc. to bring it. All right, continue, please.
This is why the Torah describes the Paschal lamb brought in Egypt as a slaughtering rather than an offering. And you shall say it is a Paschal slaughtering, Exodus. The word slaughtering does not pertain specifically to an offering to God. Every animal that is slaughtered to be eaten is called a slaughtering.
I mean, literally, slaughtered to be eaten is called slaughtering. That just is what it is. It's a in Hebrew, just so you know, it's a zevach and not a karban. Karban means an offering. Zevach means a slaughtering. It's not called a karban. I know. If you're familiar with the term, you'll be like, what do you mean it's not called? It's called a karban Pesach. That's what we call it. Up until that point, it had not been called that in Torah. That's what's mind-blowing about this. Up until this dialogue, this conversation in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, right? It had never been referred to as the Karban Pesach, as the Paschal offering. It wasn't called an offering or a sacrifice. It was called a slaughtering. It was called, the verb was make it or do it, not offer it or bring it. Thus, here's how the conversation goes. So the people come to Moses that were impure. The people that were impure come to Moses. They say to Moses, why would we be excluded from this? I mean, we acknowledge that we're impure, and we understand that an impure person cannot go to the Mishkan, go to the tabernacle and offer an offering, but this is not an offering, right? This is not an offering. So what's the problem? Moses says to them, oh, sorry to let you know, this is an offering. Year one, maybe didn't look like an offering because you didn't have a temple, sanctuary. You didn't have an altar, but you should know your homes were the temple. Your doorposts were the altar. He says it was an offering. It's an offering then, it's an offering now. But they think that the offering is only like, maybe I'll walk that back for a second. So Moses says, no, it is an offering. And their minds are thinking, okay, but maybe now there's two things. It's not really an offering. There's a level of offering and a layer of offering layered on top of dinner. In other words, at the core, it's dinner, right? It's what's for dinner. We're going to eat tonight. What's on the menu? Right? You have little fancy Passover menus. Matzah, maror, and meat. How do you get the meat? Lamb. We're eating lamb. That's on the menu. How do you get the lamb? You got to slaughter an animal. Oh, Moses says, no. It's an offering. So in their minds, they're like, it's also an offering. So they came up with a compromise. They said, look, for the offering part, let the priest do it. Let the priest do it. Let them sprinkle. They're pure anyway. Let them sprinkle the blood. They'll do that. For the eating, let us eat, even in a state of ritual impurity. Doesn't make a difference. What? You can't eat matzah if you're in a state of ritual impurity. You can't eat maror in a state of ritual impurity. Of course you can. There's no prohibition against having a seder, right, in a state of ritual impurity. I mean, we do it today. We're not considered ritually pure anymore. And yet, we have matzah and maror. It's not a problem. So they were thinking, let the ritual offering of the Paschal lamb, let that part be done by the Kohanim on our behalf or whatever. Let them do it. And then the eating we'll do. What's the problem? Okay, and that's why Moses had to consult with God, and God says, we can't do that, but we can give you another shot. Take a look at text number 6. I'll read this one. Here we go, text 6. The Paschal lamb they brought in Egypt was not a sacred offering to God and was not placed on the altar. It was a standalone mitzvah to slaughter and eat a Paschal lamb. This led the people who were impure 1 year later to suppose that the new status added to the Paschal lamb after the tabernacle was erected was layered on top of the original status. It did not negate or even diminish the original mitzvah of eating the lamb as they did the previous year. Why would the new status, the sacrificial status, negate or even alter, no puns intended, the original status, namely the mitzvah to eat the Paschal lamb? In other words, they thought the Paschal lamb originally was dinner. Now you're telling me now that we have a Mishkan, a tabernacle, we're also going to call it an offering. Okay, but that's not going to take away the dinner. So you have an offering, sure, but that's an added layer. So let's continue. They thought the Paschal lamb now had two independent sets of status, one layered over the other. A, it was an offering to God on the altar to serve as a memorial, as an expression of gratitude to God for the exodus from Egypt, as the passage states, and God passed over. So that was A. A is sacrifice, offering, thanksgiving, gratitude, etc. B, the mitzvah of eating the Paschal lamb on the eve of the 15th of the month, dinner. This was not considered eating as an offering. It was like the mitzvah of eating matzah and mar, i.e. it's on the menu. So that's what they thought. They thought that, so originally they thought that there's no sacrifice here. Then Moses says, sacrifice. So they said to Moses, fine, it's a sacrifice, but it's also the meal. It's also what we're eating tonight. So then let the Kohanim, let the priests that are pure, bring it, and we'll go eat it in our impurity. Just like we're eating matzah and mar, we can also eat the Paschal lamb. We'll also eat that together with it. And so what does Moses respond? Moses says, it's a good question. I mean, it's a good suggestion / complaint, right? You're asking, well, let me consult with God. And God says, no, it's not dinner. It is completely an offering. And as an offering, you cannot eat the meat of an offering in a state of ritual impurity. Not only can you not bring it if you're impure, you cannot eat it if you're impure. Therefore, all Paschal lambs for you this year are out. I mean, for this day are out. Come back in 30 days. You have another shot to do it. Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. But now we understand on a much deeper level what the dialogue was. It wasn't just them feeling left out and saying, why are we left out? Because the law says you're left out, but we don't like it. It wasn't just simply we don't like the law. It wasn't simply an expression of, desire to do a mitzvah that they couldn't do, which, by the way, even that would have been beautiful. And some commentators say it was just that. But that's not what Rashi says. Rashi gives it much more depth, much more nuance. Rashi gives it more dialogue. Rashi says, again, this is the way it's explained by the Rebbe, that first they came to Moses and they said, what's the problem here? We might be impure, but it's not a sacrifice. To which Moses says, this year, it is a sacrifice. Now that we have a tabernacle and we have an altar, it's now a sacrifice. They said, okay, well, maybe it's also a sacrifice, but it's also part of the meal. So why can't we eat it? Let someone else bring it and we'll eat it. To which Moses said, let me consult with God. And God turns them down and says, but you can come back next month. Make sense? All right. Well, there's one hole in this. Yeah, through all of this, there's one hole in this theory. Look back. This is like we got so close. We got so close. Take a look. Take a look at this text. Text 2b, all the way back to 2b. Look what they said. Look at verse 7. Those men said to him, they said to Moses, we are ritually unclean. Okay, let's fast forward. But why should we be excluded so as not to offer a sacrifice to God in its appointed time with all the children of Israel? What were they asked? According to text 7, what were they asking to do? We just said they weren't asked to do the sacrifice. They were just asking to eat the meat. But that's not what they said. They said they want to do the sacrifice. We just gave a whole elaborate explanation. They acknowledged, they conceded that they can't offer the sacrifice from the level of sacrifice because they're impure, but they could at least eat it because that's still, you could still eat meat. Why can't they eat meat? Why can't they eat lamb at the night of the Seder? But that's not what they said. They said, why can't we offer a sacrifice to God? And the answer is, the way the Rebbe explains it, the answer is the reason why they used that phrase, why should we exclude us to not offer a sacrifice to God? It's because of the two elements, because they thought there were two separate elements, the sacrifice element and the eating element. What they were asking is that the sacrificial element should be done on their behalf by the Kohanim, and the eating should be done by themselves, right? They should be able to do their own eating. That's what they wanted to do. Problem is, not the problem, but the depth here is that one is for them and one is for God. One of the elements is for them, eating the Paschal lamb. They enjoyed lamb, that night. The other element is for God, offering the sacrifice. And when you have those two options in front of you, doing something for yourself or doing something for God, the one that you mention, the one that you're excited about, is more about the offering to God and less about what's for yourself. That's what they displayed. They displayed in that moment that they were more interested, even though they were asking that, as Rashi says, they were asking that the Kohanim, the priests, should offer it on their behalf and that they themselves should be able to eat it that night. But when they articulated the argument, all they said is, we don't want to lose out from offering the sacrifice to God, because they weren't thinking so much about their own personal enjoyment of the Karban Pesach, of the Paschal lamb, of that meat. They were more concerned about being able to do the mitzvah of bringing this offering to God. And even if they couldn't bring it, perhaps it could be brought on their behalf by the priests. Take a look at this beautiful text. Beautiful text. Sorry about that. Let me just share the right thing, which is the PDF. Here we go. Take a look at this, text number 3. Sorry, not text 3. Let's go to where we're actually up to, which is text 7. Another Rashi. When he talks about sacrifice, he says the following. Nachas, God says, Nachas rosh lefanei shamarti v'naseh ritzoni. I am delighted that when I speak, and my will is done. In other words, what gives God nachas? You know the word nachas? Hard to translate. Delight, pleasure, satisfaction, etc. What is that? When I ask something to be done and it's done. In other words, what gives God the most nachas? Not when we enjoy eating the Paschal lamb, we enjoy eating meat, but when we do what God wants, which is bringing the offering. That's why when the people who were impure petitioned to Moses, they said, what is it that we want? What is it that we wish? What is it that we're excited about? No, you can come on. Yeah. What is it that we're excited about? We're excited primarily about being able to do what God wants, to bring the offering. This becomes the highlight, not so much as what they get from it, but what they can give to it, give to God. Turns out that their request was not so much an expression of feeling left out for personal reasons, but it was a sense of frustration that they were expressing to not have the opportunity to give God nachas. The greatest nachas, it says, is with the sacrifices, because at first glance, they don't. What's the purpose? What does it mean? What's it for? It seems so foreign. I'm bringing an animal offering to God. That's so random. And the truth is, the only reason why it's significant is because God said to do it, and we did it. Doesn't make any sense otherwise. It's just simply a request from God. God says, do it, and we did it. And so therefore, when the people were expressing what it is that they feel like they're missing out on, they said, what are we missing out on? The opportunity to give God nachas. Not, we're missing out on meat. We want meat tonight, right? They were saying, no, we want to give God nachas. We want to bring this offering, give God pleasure, the pleasure of a person, a human being, acquiescing to the divine will. That's what they wanted. What's fascinating is that when God gives them the allowance to bring the Paschal lamb a month later, you know what God says? You'll have a second chance. A month later, the 14th day of the second month, you can offer it instead, and you can eat it, God says, and you can eat it. God focuses on the eating part. And this becomes the ultimate expression of love, where we worry about God and God worries about us. When the people framed the commandment, they said, we want to bring an offering to God. And when God framed the second chance, he said, and now you have a chance to eat it. Right? It's the greatest argument, right? About whose needs should come before the other. Typically people argue, right? My needs should come first. No, my needs should come first. But imagine this argument. Your needs should come first. No, your needs should come first. That's a beautiful argument, where each one is putting the other first. And that becomes the source of, so-called tension. Here, the people are putting God first. We want to bring an offering to you, and God puts them first, saying, I'll give you a chance to enjoy the Paschal lamb, to enjoy the lamb, to enjoy the meat, to eat it together with your matzah and your maror, and enjoy that sandwich, as it were. And so this becomes a beautiful lesson for us. Let's wrap up with a few texts. It's a few beautiful texts that we have here that speak about the power of a mitzvah and doing a mitzvah for God. Text number 8. I'm sorry. Let's do text number 9. This is from the previous Rebbe. He writes, we should contemplate the great kindness of the Creator. He made it so that the tiniest of insignificant beings, the human, can bring inordinate delight to the most eminent and great God, of whom it is said, his greatness cannot be fathomed. This causes us to be perpetually excited to carry out the divine service with an eager heart and willing spirit. In other words, the gift of a mitzvah is a gift that allows the finite human being to connect to the infinite. And one final text, text 10 from the Baal Shem Tov, who uses literally romantic language to refer to a mitzvah and Torah study. If we genuinely believe that God cares for our efforts, we will be ecstatic to serve God. This is especially true when we contemplate the words of King Solomon, your lips drip flowing honey, O bride, Song of Songs, which are based on the words of his father, King David, if you lie between the lips. God awaits with diligence to kiss our lips when we speak the words of Torah and pray with love and reverence for God. Look at these words. Literally using, he's quoting Psalms from King David, Song of Songs from King Solomon, which is, the sages debated for a long time whether they should allow Song of Songs to be part of the holy books of Scripture, because it was
Steamy.
It's steamy. It's a little steamy. It's like this room before the AC kicked in. It's like, all right, it's getting a little hot in here, right? But we know it speaks about our relationship with God. And look at the Baal Shem Tov, by the way, the Baal Shem Tov, he didn't write anything, but his teachings were collected by his family and his students. So this is Keter Shem Tov. A lot of Keter Shem Tov, a lot of this book speaks again in very, for lack of a better term, romantic terminology. God, I'm just going to repeat that last line. God awaits with diligence to kiss our lips when we speak the words of Torah and pray with love and reverence for God. God is waiting for us. God desires the connection. He desires the closeness. He desires our prayers, desires our words of Torah. And of course, as we saw, he desires our mitzvah. And so when we think about what it is about a mitzvah, it's an opportunity to connect with God. That's our perspective. And God, from his side, he's looking out for our best interest. He wants us to be happy. He wants us to be satisfied. He wants us to eat the meat. To quote the old Wendy's commercial, where's the beef? But in this case, it would be more like, where's the lamb? And it took 30 days, but eventually even these individuals got it through this incredible dialogue with Moses and response from God. So in summation, they didn't know initially, the story goes, they didn't know initially that this was an offering. They thought it was just something to do, to have food for the night. And so they thought being impure was fine. Moses says, no, it's an offering. They said, well, if it's also an offering, maybe the priest can offer it and we'll eat it. And ultimately they're shot down. But the lesson, the moral of the story is how much we should desire to do a mitzvah and how much God wants to give us the greatest blessings. May we indeed invest ourselves in the mitzvahs. May indeed we receive divine blessing. And with this, we will walk in an upright fashion with happiness and health and only nachas from our own families as well. Let us say, Amen.
Amen.
All right. Questions, comments. David, I know you had a question before, but maybe we answered it. Maybe we didn't. Any questions?
You did. You answered it. I was going to ask you what the meaning of make means.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Making dinner, right?
yeah.
We don't say I offer dinner. That would be weird, right? We make a barbecue. They literally thought it's funny. Not funny. That was their perception. Okay.
This existed until the destruction of the temple.
Say it again.
Did this existed until the
Yes.
destruction of this?
Yes. Yeah. Upon which it went the way of all the offerings.
Uh-huh.
And now we actually make a point, because that it really is an offering. We make a point not to have any roasted meat at the Seder, so as not to even give the appearance that we're replicating this thing. Because we don't do today. Yeah.
So the first Pesach, when they were still in Egypt, but definitely wasn't considered a korban.
It might be that when Moses, so the question is, was the first Pesach in Egypt, was it an offering or not? It seems like Moses was telling them that FYI, it's been an offering all along. Y'all just misread it. I mean, it was a little vague.
Then, though,
That's a good question. Right. What about the ritual purity? Well, they didn't really have a formal altar or a formal temple. So it seems like they just kind of did it, to the best of their ability.
But we had the Mishkan already.
Second year. No, she was asking about year
the
one.
second.
Yeah, she asked about year one. No, that's was asking a simple question. An important question. Year one, what was the status? If you say it wasn't an offering, well, then it changed, maybe. But if it was an offering, well, then how could anyone have brought it year one? They were all in a state of ritual impurity. They were definitely in a state of ritual impurity. They didn't have any, they didn't have, well, maybe you could say that maybe you could say that the prohibition hadn't yet been put in place. The prohibition against that ritual impurity as a problem for offerings wasn't yet put in place. So that could be the answer. They were ritually impure, but they hadn't received the laws of purity and impurity or the law of the red heifer purification process. So therefore, it's all good. They just didn't know there was an offering. They thought it was dinner. Like, I'm making dinner. Like, we're preparing meat for the night. Like, that's it. We're barbecuing in advance of the Seder. Like, that's what they like. So we're good. I was like, no, you're not good. Can we be half good? No, no meat for you. No meat for you.
So is that why there's no request anywhere else in the Torah of like Shavuot Sheni or Rosh Hashanah Sheni or any of that? Is like they knew that those were like sacrifices.
I guess. Yeah. Mira's asking, pointing out something compelling, which is we don't find really this ambiguity or request by any other, missed opportunity or right, because they would have been impure. Somebody was carrying Joseph's remains, so somebody would have been impure by all of the other ritual holiday sacrifices, etc. We don't find any other complaints. I guess there was straightforward. It just can't do it.
We asked Moses before.
Yeah, he's like, forget it. We know this guy. this guy. It's impossible.
They have challenges.
All right, good. Made sense? A little bit technical, but I think it's beautiful. I think what's beautiful.
Holidays though, or was that like only the Kohanim were bringing holiday?
Yeah, that's true also. Yeah, they were collective. The other holiday offerings were collective. So then it wouldn't be the right.
That's why the guys have to go down to Jerusalem.
Yeah, they were encouraged to bring. They didn't have to. If you were there, you had to bring. No, if you were there, you had to bring. But you didn't. If you weren't there, then. But Pesach, everyone had to be represented.
Okay.
There's a little bit more of an urgency there. No, the chagiga was on behalf of everybody. Not everybody brought a chagiga, the holiday offering. It was just the Passover. Yeah. If you were there, you brought an animal because you're there. What are you gonna do? Show up empty-handed? At least flowers, something.
What was the requirement? Because like it is a requirement that they're supposed to go to Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
3 times a year, the men go to Jerusalem.
Right. So if you're so then you show up to the temple.
Okay.
Did they also have to? But they didn't have to bring a holiday offering.
Okay.
The holiday offering was one on behalf of. No, you're right. It was one on behalf of the kahal.
And you didn't necessarily go in to do
Right.
the offering. You brought it to the door and said, "Here, priest, take care of it."
Right. The Paschal offering was different. They had groups. I recently shared in one of the classes a quote from Josephus where he writes about like how many people were represented on the ships in a matter of a few hours on that afternoon. Like he writes historically, like they had a mechanism. They had enough Kohanim. They had enough space, whatever they figured it out. There was thousands and thousands and thousands of animals brought that day. It
was one hell of a barbecue.
Can you imagine? No, but when you think about the temple, like there's all this analogy of like somebody walking into Jerusalem for the temple. He's been hearing about it.
So
Well, they had an altar. That was the smoke. Roasted.
The Kohanim were just fancy chefs.
Well, it was a slaughterhouse. No, there's now there's like this parable or whatever. Maybe it's a real story. Somebody who hears about the temple and you know, goes there and sees what's going on. Like, this is the temple. I was expecting like a spiritual play, and it's a slaughterhouse. I think most of us, if not all of us, have not been in a slaughterhouse.
Yeah,
I happen to have been in a slaughterhouse. My grandfather was a shochet, so I visited him a few times. It's a pretty
Gruesome.
yeah, it's not a pleasant, it's not like, oh, here's the slaughterhouse. It's like more like, make sure you're wearing boots and overalls. It's like, it's a little bit of a situation there, right? And so it's kind of like, but that was the space. And a carbon, like nothing else, almost represents a person's surrender to God's will. It makes no sense. It's like, it's not something that we would ever come up with. And it's like, but God said, this is the protocol, so we do. Anyway, good. That's it for tonight. Thank you all for joining. Hope you enjoyed it. Now we have in the theme, pursuant to the theme, we have wings. So everyone's invited for wings.
Gonna try.
Mike,
Papa.
you never had savam?
No.
Oh, but not the wings. Oh yeah, they're very good. All right, Lila Tov, everybody. Doreen, good to see you. Larry, Dr. Maxie, Vlad, Kate, Susan, Danny, great to see you all. Lila Tov, we'll see you.